Hey, I'm Casper, and this is my permaculture orchard and garden in spring of 2026. Let me show you around. Everything's pretty tidy right now because I'm going to be selling up, and it's going to be listed any day. So here's my veg beds at the front. We've got some elephant garlic here. We've got an outdoor green grape, Vogue Vanderland, and here's some onions here. We've got our berry bushes up against the wall. This is a massively productive gooseberry called Invicta. I gave it a big trim this year and it's looking a bit bare, but I'm sure it'll fill out. These are red currants here, and this is an amazing mulberry called Morris acidosa Muller, and it's supposed to be very productive in our climate. So it already had fruit when it got delivered from the nursery, so I'm quite excited to see how that's going to do. And this used to be a huge kale bed with my perennial kale. They were still producing after 5 years, but I've replaced it with a rose bed, to pretty the place up. I've got some spuds in the ground here, but I put them in very late. They're not out yet. Here's some children of the perennial kale from some seeds I saved, and a bunch of garlic. We've got over here a rare apple, the Lebanese crab apple, and it seems to be doing well here. It's just growing very slowly over the years. We've got a cob nut here. It's Webb's prize cob. Got several gooseberries here, and they've been productive. They're still small bushes, but they get pretty covered in berries. This is just a berry. It had a slow start, but last year it was very productive too. And here is a Rowan hybrid that's supposed to have edible fruit. It's called Burka, Sorbus Burka. And it had some fruit last year. I tasted it. It wasn't very sweet, but it was quite edible. I'm sure you can make jam out of it. Got another gooseberry here. 2 more hazelnuts. This one's getting big. Another gooseberry. This is a rowan tree that was in the hedgerow when I moved in, and I've grafted the Burka onto it, and it took. So there'll be a branch of Burka with edible berries there. And let's have a look at the main plantings. So here's a sour cherry, Morello, and it does well. The birds love eating it every year. This apple was supposed to be grenadier, but it came mislabeled from the orchard, but it's super productive and they're quite tasty. I had a lot of these last year. This is a plum. Can't remember which one, but it had flowers for the first time this year. And you know what? I've forgotten what everything is, but I'm just going to show you around. This is a persimmon. This is from a Dutch breeder. It's his own breeding called Sunrise, and he recommends it for cold and wet climates. Here's a French apple. It's one that I'm using in my late breeding project. Here's an Irish apple, Mrs. Perry. Very productive. Nice big sweet apples. They're summer apples, they don't store well, but I had to cut out quite a bit of canker this year, so it's not super disease resistant, even though it's listed as that. Here's an interesting thing that grew from the graft junction from a pear on a dwarfing quince rootstock, and I thought it might be a chimera or something, so I've just kept it to observe it. And we have another Irish apple here, April Queen. this is actually just a quince C rootstock that I let grow out, and it's a beautiful bush. I wanted to taste what the fruit were like. Here's an apple that I found in the roadside that I grafted and brought here, and the apples on it are quite tasty. A little fig, Little Miss Figgy is the breed name, cute name. And here's some apples from my breeding project that I've got on a dwarfing rootstock to make them fruit faster. Here's another French apple. This is Reinette Bretagne or something like that. Anyway, it's from Brittany, and it's part of the late apple breeding project, so it flowers very late. I tasted one of those last year and it was really tasty. Here's the tunnel. I'll show you inside there in a second. And here's my apple breeding project. These are all seedlings from Cork Plat, which is the core of the breeding project I'm doing. And it's a notoriously late flowerer. It's got really great qualities, and it's a really old breed. It's from Roman times. So I've got about 4 or 5 other late flowering apples that overlap, and I'm just keeping the apples of Cork Plat, so I'm not sure the parents, but there's absolutely nothing else flowering at the same time. I mean, these things flower at the start of June, so every single other apple is done. All the crab apples are done, so it must be just those 5 crossing with each other. Lots of onions in the tunnel. I overwinter these, and I get about 50 to 60 kilos every year out of this tunnel over the winter. I've been selling them in the local market in Dunmanway. Here's a persimmon. One of the first I got, it's called Nikshu. And it's Nikita's Gift, which is a famous hybrid between American and Asian persimmons. And it's crossed with Taishu, which is a famous Japanese breed. And it's had male flowers the last few years. That comes from Taishu. But you can see here that it's got female flowers for the first time. So if this fruits this year or next year and successfully carries them, it could be one of the first persimmons to fruit in Ireland. So that's really special. And it's not focusing well, but you can see the little flowers. They come out of the junction with the leaves, and that's how you can tell they're female flowers. The male flowers just come in a big spread like a bunch of bananas right at the growth tip. So it's really exciting to have female flowers on that. And this grapevine, Black Hamburg, it's getting big now. It's been here like 5 years, and it produced a lot of grapes last year. Well, for its size. Maybe 20, 30 bunches, and I had fun eating them. Here's a pear called Invincible. It flowers twice. That's where the name comes from, so that it can avoid the late frost. It's on a dwarfing quince rootstock, and it's just kind of stayed this shape for years. Very little branching or growth. It just puts on a huge amount of flowers on a small little frame. Here's Cork Plat, the core of the breeding project. And as you can see, it's just still fully dormant and will be for another couple of months. And in Ireland, with so many unpredictable late frosts, right? If the late frost comes when the flowers are on the tree, it's not going to produce fruit that year. The flowers are going to be damaged. And so that's the reason behind the breeding project. I feel like with climate change and these more unpredictable springs that we're having, we need to start breeding and relying on these late flowering apples. And it's old genetics, you know? It's only really preserved in France anymore. They're apples that finish late in the year and they store over winter. It was a way for merchants to sell them, to be the only merchant with apples in the spring back in the old days. Here's a nice pear, and I ate this last year. I finally had one pear out of this whole place, and it was so delicious. It was amazing. And I can't really remember the name right now. Durando. It's a French pear also. And it's been my most reliable. It's got a great structure. It started flowering the earliest of any of the pears I put in. It's a big structure. You know, it's grown a lot more than the other pears I have, which you'll see in a second. And yeah, it's the first one I got to taste, and the taste was great. You know, a soft, juicy pear. A little bit of acidity in there to make it interesting. This is Katie, a classic. Lots of Irish growers grow this, and it just is bulletproof here. It makes these small red apples that are kind of waxy on the skin, but they're very sweet. It's a summer apple, so they don't store, and you just get rakes and rakes of them every year. They're disease-free, so you know you need at least one of these if you're planting apples here. This is a gumi. You can't really get this off any nurseries in Ireland anymore. And it has these little red berries with silver spots on them. They taste a little bit tomatoey, but they're quite sweet. They make really good jam. And the flowers are kind of discreet. You can see them there, this little trumpet shape. And, you know, it's not that decorative, but when the berries are on it, it's beautiful. It does have some nasty thorns. I'm kind of scared of this bush, to be honest with you. Here's a nice apple. Just coming into maturity. You know, it's made apples the last 2 years or so. It's got a nice goblet structure. And I'm forgetting the name of that too. Here's a big event this year, the Green Gauge. I mean, look at the size of that trunk. I've been waiting for this to flower for like 5 years, and it came huge. I mean, it came as a big tree from the nursery. And so it's probably 10 years old, I would say. And it hasn't flowered until this year, and I can see lots of flowers on it. We didn't really have any major frost that would kill it. We might have gone down to -1. I don't think we hit a -2 whilst the flowers were on it. And there's some new flowers opening still. So I'm quite hopeful that this might finally produce a green gauge. And the excitement is because green gauge is just famous as the most delicious gauge. Very fussy, the most delicious plum of any. And you know, it's fussy to grow and it doesn't fruit all the time, but when it does, it's supposed to be delicious. Here's another apple, part of my late flowering breeding project, as you can see, still fully dormant. And this is Crawley Beauty. It's an eating apple, and it flowers really late, even later than Cork plum. This is Victoria. Famous plum. It's probably the only plum that people grow in Ireland, really. And it's on a dwarf rootstock. It's staying really small, and it's got flowers for the first time, which is great. Might produce some fruit. Here's another apple getting ready to flower. This is called Appletown Wonder. It's an Irish apple, and they're supposed to be absolutely massive. The apples are produced like 500 grams each. So I was looking forward to seeing one of these. It's flowered last year, but it didn't produce any fruit. Here's one of my pears, and still dormant, and it's just a little runt. I was going to replace this, but I'm leaving, so I'm not going to bother. But it might flower this year. We'll see. I mean, that's been in the ground about 4 years, so it really is quite the runt. This is another apple in my breeding project, and it's another French apple. It's a very late flower. You can see it's still fully dormant, and it's, what's it called? Belleville Dessalines. So she's a beautiful girl. Here's another sour cherry. It's Morello again. And I plant these in the shade, basically. They're famous for being able to fruit even up against the north wall. Here's another plum I'm excited for. The flowers are gone already, but it flowered for the first time this year. It's Mirabelle de Nancy, a French plum. Makes these small little plums where the flesh stays quite dry, so it's good for baking with. And it's turning into a decent, healthy tree. Plums are tricky in Ireland, so I'm glad it's doing well. Here's another pear. You can see it's bigger than the last one, and it's only been in, it went in 2 years after the other one. This is Beth. I think they grow this a lot in the UK, and it's supposed to be good for our conditions. Here's an apple. This is a cooking apple, and it's been killing it every year. And it makes a lot of horizontal growth, which is just covered in fruit every year. It's a cooker. It's Lane's Prince Albert. Yeah, Lane's Prince Albert. And it's great. I would really recommend it for Irish conditions as a cooker. Here's another pear. This is a Dutch pear. I forget what it's called, but it's been really good. It's growing well here. It's got a big structure, and it's flowered the last 2 years, but no fruit. But I think it'll give fruit this year. Here's a quince, one of my bigger trees. It has beautiful pink kind of single rose like flowers, like a dog rose. And it made a lot of quinces last year. They were really tasty. Very sour, and very aromatic. I was making tea out of them. Here we have a damson, Merriweather, I think. And it was just buried in flowers this spring. It's already, on the tail end of flowering. So I really hope it'll get a lot of damsons this year. It flowered a lot last year and didn't keep any due to frost. Here's another nice apple. A French apple is not part of my breeding project because it flowers a bit earlier than the others. It doesn't really overlap. It's called Amour, and it was a delicious apple, really fragrant. It's bulletproof, disease-proof, and it's done really well here. I'd recommend that. This plum here is Ulan's Golden Gauge, another gauge, and you can see some flowers on it. So I hope that's going to fruit this year, and I heard that's great for our conditions, and it seems to be. It's got strong growth and it's flowering well, so here's hoping. Here's the sweet chestnut corner. Here's one that I put in last year called Bouche de Bédezac, and that's a classic kind of French chestnut. They grow a lot of that there. I got this because it will overlap with the large sweet chestnut here, which has flowered every year and made fruit, but they never fill out. So I wanted to see if it was about pollination. But last year, this new one flowered too. They've overlapped perfectly, and the nuts still didn't fill out on the big one, so fuck that. And here is a sucker off the rootstock, and for the same reason I kept that to see if having a different pollinator would help, but this also flowered last year and it didn't help, so that's a shame. We've got some interesting stuff back here. This is flowering for the first time too. This is the Kazakh apple. This is like a crab apple from the Altai Mountains in Kazakhstan, and it's the original main parent of our edible apples. What we eat as apples are this crossed with the European crab apple. So it's endangered, and it's very exciting that that's flowering here. I hope it has fruit. Here's a medlar. This was covered in fruit. I kind of relegated this to the hedgerow because I don't really like medlars, to be honest, but it's a beautiful tree. It has these nice big kind of felty leaves which look pretty, and it does make a lot of fruit. It's a decent size. Here's another Kazakh apple from a different nursery, and it too is flowering. So that's exciting. And it would be really great to taste some Kazakh apple fruit. It's an ancient species, you know? It's the one that started it all. Here's more gummies. One is a Ukrainian variety, and one is Sweet Scarlet, which is probably the most famous. And the big bush I showed you earlier was also Sweet Scarlet. I just grafted it onto autumn olive here. There's some walnuts back here. Fernor and Fernet, but Fernet died, and Fernor's there all alone. He probably won't have anyone to pollinate him, so I was going to replace them, but I'm leaving. Here's the chickens. Hello. They're really happy, great breed, very productive, very robust. Here's an Amelanchier called Smoky, one of the more popular ones. It's always covered in beautiful flowers. It has these nice bronze-colored leaves in spring and in autumn, and it makes these little berries that taste like blueberries. It's a really nice bush, very decorative and tasty fruit. Not much production, I mean, but it's tasty. Here is a mulberry, black mulberry, which are supposed to be able to grow here, but it's a very slow growth. That could take a long time to fruit. That's why the Korean mulberry I showed right at the start, Muller, Morris acidosa, is way more promising for Ireland, I think, and there's quite a few European nurseries you can get that at. Here's my little pond. Here's some flowers I transplanted from the local river. Here's some mint, water mint, that you can see growing up from under the surface. Here's an Irish apple called Samyang. It makes these little tiny russeted apples that are super punchy flavor, really aromatic, and this cool like russeted skin. They crack a bit, but they still produce the fruit, and it's very tasty. Here's a plum, probably the most promising plum for our conditions here, even more so than Victoria, and it's called Tsar. It's more of a sour plum for cooking, but it's supposed to be bulletproof as well, and it also has the reputation that you can grow it up against a north wall. So, you could plant this thing in heavy shade and get fruit off it, is the story I'm told. We've got some bluebells out already. I don't really mow them, I just let them be. Same with the primroses. Here we have the Victoria plum. Hasn't flowered yet. I think it flowered last year. Hasn't fruited for me yet. The Tsar did fruit once or twice already. And they're nice plums. They're not even that sour. Here's another great apple that does really well here. Can't remember its name. It's got a great natural structure. It's been really easy to prune this one. And, I'd recommend it if I could remember the name. That's just how it goes. So, that's the place. It's going to be very sad to see this place go. I hope somebody else that appreciates the garden gets it. And, this was my dream, to have a little cottage and to make a beautiful garden, and I achieved that. So it's made me really happy. The whole process has just been really joyful. So that's wonderful. I hope you enjoyed seeing the place. I'm going to sign off. Later.